Hi everyone, and welcome to an introduction to IBM MQ. My name is Amy McCormick, and I'm the product manager for MQ. So I cover all of the form factors, and usually I spend a lot of time talking about what's new in the product, how customers are using some of those capabilities, and generally kind of focusing at a lower level. And I thought it would be really good for people who aren't that familiar with IBM MQ or even with messaging overall, to have more of a kind of higher level discussion about, what messaging is, why it's important, and then, looking at MQ and why it's trusted by customers, and give a couple of examples of how it's being used across different industries today. So for those of you who are already familiar with MQ, this is we'll talk a little bit about our latest release towards the end, but bear with us for the time being, because we're going to start right at the very top, and that is about why messaging is essential today. So if we take this example, this is travel, but this is we could take this and apply it to any industry. We could apply it to healthcare, to retail, to automotive, manufacturing, finance. This is really applicable across all industries. And it's because there are so many different types of applications and just a vast number of applications that are being used today. And if we take the example that's on the screen, as I mentioned, this is for travel. When we think about the data that's flowing around and the different types of applications that are being used, it can become really complex. So, just as an example, an organization might have applications that deal with flight reservations, including things like catering and luggage and all of those sorts of things. We might have applications that deal with flight status, loyalty programs, and that doesn't even include the need to connect with partner organizations. So this could be, booking at the same time your flight, with your hotel, with your car hire, all of those sorts of things. And just one single trip can result in hundreds of messages, generating lists of available flights, available hotels, trying to coordinate all that together, and then actually paying for things, all of the payments backwards and forwards, credit card authorization checks, all of those sorts of things. It's huge, and businesses have to really be able to deal with this and do things efficiently, quickly, and make sure that customers have a really good experience. But also customers can be a bit fickle. When they find things that actually make sense for them, or a particular way they want to use it, they want to be able to do it quite quickly, and they want that across multiple different applications. So for instance, a few years ago, it was all about everything, starting to move to smartphones, and businesses really had to adapt quite quickly. And so it's really important that not only can businesses connect all of the applications they need to achieve their business results, but also do so rapidly, be able to change, so that they're more effective at delivering those great customer experiences. And like I said, this is across different industries. I've just used travel as the example. But something like IBM MQ is critical for businesses. It's critical for applications to talk to each other. And so this is where the kind of high level, what is messaging? What is MQ? What does it actually do? This is where this comes in. So businesses have a couple of things in common. So they all have applications or systems, services, databases, and so on. And all of those have one thing in common, and that's that they emit messages and they consume messages in order to perform their business functions. So we see that applications are transmitting those messages. But what happens if an application itself is down? This could be because it's been taken offline for maintenance. It could be that it's had some sort of attack that means it's out of order, or it could be something to do with the infrastructure itself. Messages might still be sent from the sending application, but they're not going to get to the receiving application. Now, you could put a few things in place to stop that from happening. So, for instance, In the sending application, you could have your app developers put in some logic around receiving acknowledgements. And if they don't get an acknowledgement, then they can put retries in. But what that means is that that application developer is writing something that is specific to the receiving application. And that's okay if it's just, one application that you're sending to. But that's not really the case these days. I mean, this application could be sending messages to multiple applications, or, could be receiving messages from other applications. And actually, when you start to scale that sort of thing up, that introduces some real challenges. So we put something like MQ in the middle. And what MQ provides is a safe space for messages to go. So that if an application goes down, MQ holds onto those messages until that application or the infrastructure is back up and running. So we have a good connection between these applications. And again, it's something that needs to be secure. So we want all of these messages as they flow between these applications to be secure. And MQ provides that. It provides a way for you to secure your messages while they're in transit, but also while they're at rest. It provides security from internal and external threats. So for instance, it has TLS secured communications. It provides the ability to do access-based controls, user authentication, authorization, all of those sorts of things that you would expect and demand when you're dealing with mission-critical data. But also, messages are assured for delivery. And this is one of the really key things for MQ, is that when it receives messages, you know that those messages are going to get to their intended destination exactly once. And exactly once delivery is really, really key. So if we go back to the travel use case that we were talking about initially, if we think about booking a flight, for instance, I don't want my booking, when I hit send, to get there multiple times. I want that booking to be made exactly once. I only want to pay for it once. When I come through customs and border patrol, whatever country I'm traveling to, I want to essentially come in once into that country. Doing so less than once or more than once is going to cause me some real issues. And again, we can use that across multiple different industries. In healthcare, for instance, when if I'm admitted to a hospital for something, I want my medical record to be updated so that it's accurate, so that it's providing that single source of truth. I want my patient data to be transferred across my care continuum exactly once. And so that's why assured delivery is so important. We need to make sure that, if a message is going to get there once, that it gets there only once, not less than once, not more than once. And finally, I need to do that across all of the systems that I have connected to my business, that I'm using as part of my business. And so this is where MQ is a bit special, because we know lots of companies have grown, over the years, and they have applications spread across multiple different deployments. Some might be in private data centers, some might be across different clouds. And we need to be able to connect not just within those clouds, but across them as well, and ensure that data, wherever it resides, can be used effectively and efficiently to achieve business results. And that's really key. So when we're looking at MQ, one of the main things about MQ is that it runs everywhere, and that we support businesses wherever they have their applications running and however they want to run their messaging infrastructure. So for instance, if you're running on premise, or if you've got a hybrid architecture, we support customers who want to run in VMs or containers across a number of distributed systems. So this is what we call kind of the core systems, so like Windows, Linux, AIX, etc. But also, if you're running a private data center and you wanted to consolidate from multiple different servers and multiple different machines onto a hardware appliance, then we've got our MQ appliance, which is a dedicated appliance for MQ. MQ's already been installed onto it, so you don't have to worry about the kind of full stack underneath it. It's a single appliance that you can connect your applications to. And we also, of course, support the IBM System Z mainframes as well. So we have an MQ version specifically designed for that, that exploits the underlying capabilities of that particular form factor. And then, of course, we support customers who want to run in public clouds as well. So we support all of the major clouds. IBM has a full list of eligible clouds on the website, which I can provide a link to if needed. But all of the usual ones there: IBM Cloud, AWS, Google, Azure, Alibaba's on there, a few others. And customers can run in VMs, or they can run Red Hat OpenShift, Kubernetes across any of those clouds. And IBM MQ has capabilities and the guidance and sample images and things like that to help you very quickly get started. If you wanted to deploy in containers, or even if you wanted to deploy to VMs. And then on the right-hand side, we also have a SaaS service as well. So a lot of customers are looking at how, cloud first and SaaS first. So lots of companies are looking at how they can use SaaS to reduce costs, how they can increase efficiency. And so we have a cloud service today that's hosted by IBM on either IBM Cloud or AWS. It's managed by IBM. So we do all things like the operations under the covers, making sure that deployments are running smoothly. And customers really, coming in to create what we call queue managers. So this is the logic where your messages are stored between applications, and deploy them and do the monitoring and management of those. And IBM will deal with all of the operations under the covers. So it's so really we have a full suite available for customers, however they want to deploy MQ. And of course, like I said, this isn't just about making sure that we're connecting applications that are running on premise to other applications on premise. This is about enabling customers to run a consistent messaging architecture right across. So one of the key things for us that we strive to do is we strive to make MQ as consistent as possible across these different form factors. Now, there might be small changes. So for instance, I mentioned with IBM Z, that we build MQ specifically for this platform so that it exploits the functionality and high performance and scalability and all of that good stuff about IBM Z. But actually, when you build a queue manager on Z, you're using a lot of the same skills and a lot of the same technologies that you would use across other private clouds and also across public cloud and our SaaS. So you can take those skills, you can use those right across from end to end, across hybrid and multi-cloud. Now, of course, I mentioned that there are other ways to connect assets. So, for instance, application developers could write in retry logic to their applications if they fail. But a lot of customers think, well, why can't I just do this with HTTP? Why can't I just use APIs? Why can't I just use Kafka? So I wanted to touch on that a little bit here, because yes, the answer is yes. Of course, you can use those. They are messaging. They fall under messaging, and so customers can use them. So you could use HTTP. So let's focus on that one for a minute. And it is relatively easy to connect two applications together over HTTP. But just as I mentioned about those kind of the retry logic, if you need additional qualities of service, things can become quite complex quite quickly. Building in the level of service required needs to be done for each connection. So things like security and that transactionality and so on. And then you need to think about how it can be scaled as additional application instances need to be added. So for instance, if you're experiencing a peak in workload and you need additional application instances, how is that going to work? But also if brand new applications are added, or applications move between cloud and or maybe you want to move them to like a different on-premise server, for instance. All of those things result in changes for your application developers. And that's why it can become very complex very quickly. But MQ actually provides a lot of that for you. So it takes away a lot of the complexities, a lot of the overheads on those application teams, but also on the kind of core IT teams as well. And what's more, if your applications and systems aren't all identical, it doesn't really matter, because MQ applications that were written with applications that were written, a week ago in the latest language, they can communicate with applications that were written 20 years ago. If you need message format or protocol transformation, we've got things like IBM App Connect that can do that capability, and it includes MQ as well. So, you have that transformation as well as the guaranteed delivery between applications from different vendors. You could look at using REST APIs or HTTP APIs. And APIs are a really great way of exposing and consuming data by services. So they can be secured easily. They can be called over HTTP by internal and external developers to extend the reach of existing applications, for instance. But what if the service that's being called isn't available? HTTP is synchronous. So each request message has a corresponding response. So that is an acknowledgement of the request. So your client or service will have to implement the reconnection or failover logic. Otherwise, the requests can be lost and information might be missed. And this is very similar to what I was saying about application developers. You can do that within the application itself. So just as you can do it with these REST APIs. But while that's happening, the service might be waiting. It's not moving on to process any additional workload because it's constantly retrying. So it's not moving on to process anything else. Now you can implement asynchronous patterns over HTTP, but the simplistic and the ubiquitous nature of HTTP is lost. And obviously you're adding additional overheads. So the way MQ works is that your applications are essentially anonymous from each other. You've got your sending application that is sending a message to my queue, to the MQ queue. And as far as the application is concerned, unless it's something that requires that kind of transactionality, that message is sent and it's going to be received. So the application can move on and start processing other workload. So it's kind of a fire and forget. That's why asynchronous messaging is really good, especially for like conversational applications as well. So where you need that kind of back and forth. MQ has ways that enables customers to implement that. We do support a number of different patterns, and I'll talk about some of those as well as we go on. But essentially, if you're needing applications to kind of fire and forget messages, MQ is really, really good for doing that. And of course, we've got Kafka. So event streaming technologies such as Apache Kafka, we've got IBM event streams in IBM. They've grown in popularity hugely over the last few years. And when to use Kafka or IBM MQ depends on the use case. Event messaging and enterprise messaging are complementary technologies rather than competitive. It's not one versus the other. So Kafka provides an event streaming platform. It's kind of like publish subscribe, if any of you are familiar with that, but on steroids. It provides that asynchronous communication, but it's not designed for conversational messaging, so request reply use cases. When it comes to microservice support and portability, MQ is much more lightweight, and it can be deployed into a container alongside the microservice on a fraction of core. Whereas Kafka is quite heavyweight, has quite a lot of components. While Kafka does provide transactional APIs to process events, sometimes if they require ACID properties on transactions, Kafka's not really the right solution for that. Of course, it can be done, just like you could use HTTP to connect applications. But like I said, it adds additional complexity. And then finally, one of Kafka's key design features is to store event history. Now, it's not always necessary to store data. So if you've got applications and you don't need that data to be stored, then Kafka might not be the right solution. You might want to use MQ. But if you do need that event history, then of course, Kafka's a really good solution for that. So adding that event history, that store of data, how long do you store it for? How much data have you got? What's the cost of storage? What's the security risk? So lots of different things that you need to think about. And I've put in a link on here on this page, not designed for conversational messaging, that actually takes you off to an article that we've written that says, here are some really great use cases for Kafka, here are some for MQ. So if you wanted to know a bit more about the differences between those two, then I definitely recommend reading that. And obviously, we'll make these charts available for people after the call. So MQ is proven. So it's if you need enterprise messaging versus events or APIs, as an enterprise messaging solution, it is the solution for critical hybrid cloud messaging. Customers from all industries, of all sizes, in all countries and lots of regions in the world, these organizations are betting their business on MQ's qualities of service, its highly scalable nature, its ability to connect applications wherever they reside, and its security as well. Trillions of messages are sent every day across the MQ network, and our customers can rest assured that every single message that is sent will make it to its intended destination. And it's very reliable. Our customers are our best advert here. It's been tried and tested and trusted in the market now for nearly 30 years. I mean, that's insane. It's that it's still going strong. And I want to talk a bit about, how MQ has modernized over the last couple of years as we go. But I wanted to first sort of talk about some different use cases for MQ. So first of all, let's look at delivering exceptional customer experiences. So I'm going to talk about 3 use cases and how MQ's kind of core value essentially helps customers to achieve growth. So far we've gone through and we've looked at what messaging is. Why would we put something like MQ between our applications, and also when to use MQ and when like APIs and Kafka would make sense. So now let's look at how customers are using MQ and why it's critical to their organizations. So we're going to focus on retail first. And connected systems ensure real-time inventory visibility to balance stock with precision and make accurate omni-channel communications. So it's really important when we think about retail, for instance, that we're going to efficiently unite data from sales channels. More often than not, these are across many different systems, and we want to do that not just for existing omni-channel systems, but also from third-party providers, packaging, warehousing, logistics, returns processing, and so on. There's a huge amount of stuff going on when we think about retailers, and to get clear visibility into inventory, that's pretty daunting. If we think the data might be locked away in silos, right across the business, one of 100 applications might go down due to a fault, and that can cause systems to be updated with incorrect data or missing information. To ensure that customers can get what they want across every channel, exactly when they want it, we need to make sure that inventory is accurate. So if we think about how MQ helps with this one, so first of all, I did mention earlier that I'd talk about some of the different patterns within MQ. And so publish and subscribe is one of those patterns that MQ offers. So MQ's publish and subscribe capabilities are really the crossover point between MQ and Kafka. So Kafka works on a kind of pub-sub model where we have producers who are making data available to a huge number of consumers, whereas MQ is much more on a kind of granular level, where we might have, a few to 100 different consumers of message, but it's never really designed for the same scale as Kafka when it comes to PubSub. Nevertheless, for this type of use case, MQ works really well, and we have customers who do this today. So IBM MQ's publish and subscribe or PubSub capabilities enable our retail customers to act on events as they occur across omni-channel businesses. So we've got mission critical data flowing over MQ that can be made available to event streaming applications, for instance. So you can use MQ as a Kafka producer. So if you have mission critical data, you can make that available to Kafka so that you can start doing stream processing with it. So quite often we see customers who use both, but also, if you wanted that kind of those granular events, then MQ is a really good solution for that. Then we have things like simple integration everywhere. So this is about taking care of reliably transporting data, freeing up IT teams to focus on developing the applications that will deliver value for the business. Because we have several deployment options from private cloud to public cloud, hybrid at the edge of enterprise, including our certified containers for portability, businesses can choose the right environment for their applications and know that their business data, wherever it's coming from or going to, it will get there. And then finally, flexible and high performance. So we have a number of different capabilities within IBM MQ that enable organizations to automatically scale application instances, scale their MQ queue managers to connect into multiple application instances. And with things like uniform clusters, for instance, so this is, if you're familiar with MQ, hopefully you'll know what I'm talking about. So uniform clusters enable you to essentially automatically create multiple instances of the same queue manager to connect to multiple application instances and balance the workload intelligently across all of them, so that if you are experiencing peaks in traffic, that can be balanced effectively across your IT infrastructure. And then also things like the ability to create highly available, resilient architectures, regardless of where and how you're deploying. So for instance, if you're deploying on-premise or to cloud, you can have high availability set up in a way that ensures that you have access to the data, because that's the most important thing. If a server goes down, you still want that data to be available. So we have something, I'll talk about it a bit in a minute, but we have something called native HA, so native high availability. So this is about ensuring that we're building that resilience right into the heart of the queue manager. And you can, if you're using something like OpenShift or Kubernetes, you can have your kind of high availability taken care of by that, relying on the infrastructure to do that kind of failover for you. But actually the challenge there comes with, how do you get hold of that data? Because that's the real thing when you're running highly available workloads. So a number of the changes that we've made, the updates that we've made into MQ, enable customers to build these highly scalable, highly resilient systems that are perfect for cloud native deployments. So when it comes to retail, ensuring that stock's accurate, it comes down to, ensuring that when an order is placed, that order gets there, that every single message that is kicked off as a part of that makes it to the intended destination, that if a system goes down, regardless of where it is, that we have access to that data so that we can continue to processing, and also that it's highly performant as well. MQ is capable of processing hundreds of thousands of transactions, every day for companies, regardless of the industry. When we think about retail, this is really important that we make sure that every single application is as accurate as possible. Analytics and AI. So more and more our customers want to do something with their data. They want to get more value out of it. They want to improve their decision making. They want to transform their business through evidence-based analysis, essentially. So we need to help improve the quantity and the quality of data that we're surfacing to analytics or to AI. So when we think about data, this is the fuel that powers artificial intelligence, or analytics. And despite being critical to the equation, data sometimes gets overlooked or minimized. It takes hard work to get data to the point where it's usable for AI. But ultimately, it comes down to two things, as I mentioned: data quantity and data quality. A load of customers that we've got are going through digital transformation, and we know that can intensify data issues. Data silos and data overload can lead to incomplete data sets, and that prevents the visibility of patterns and behaviors that we need for predictions. Now, before customers tend before customers take the AI plunge, they want to ensure that they have the right data. They want to ensure they have enough of it so that they can actually gain insights, they can predict outcomes, and essentially transform the business through accurate decision making. So when we think about how MQ can help customers with generating data for analytics and for AI, again, it comes to that ability to connect data right across hybrid and multi-cloud, but also supporting open protocols. So, let's take data from devices, for instance. Well, IBM MQ has MQTT support built in. If you wanted to connect to open applications, AMQP is a protocol, we support that. So it's really important to be able to bring together every piece of data, no matter where it's coming from across the entire organization, and also be able to scale so that it accommodates those peak workloads, as we've discussed, because that's really the thing that's going to help with the kind of quantity of data needed to really power the AI projects. Then finally, we talk about assured message delivery. So being able to store messages, allowing programs to run independently of each other, so at different speeds, at different times, in different locations. And as I mentioned before, is if an application is unavailable, MQ holds that message until it can be delivered. And so, we can rest assured that AI systems are receiving the right data for insights and predictions. I missed smart data collection. I'm not sure how I did that. My apologies. So data flowing between applications. So if you have an MQ installed today, so this is something I'll talk about, something called streaming queues. You can see it here on the image. So this is something that was released in version 9.2.3, and it is going to be made available to customers on version 9.3. So that's coming out soon. We've already announced that. If you already have an MQ messaging solution, you'll be flowing data between those applications. And more often than not, these are going to be mission critical applications, customer data, business data. And obviously, we talked about message delivery, assurity, so, making sure that it gets there. But actually, there's an awful lot of value to those messages if you can take that and you can make it available to analytics or AI applications. And so that's what streaming queues enables you to do. So you don't have to change your architecture to be pub sub, where you have your existing application where that's your intended target, the data that application subscribing to receive a copy of it, and then whatever your intended analytics, AI, or even Kafka, subscribing to it as well. You can leave your architecture as it is, with the point-to-point delivery between those applications, ensuring that is uninterrupted, the flow of data between those is uninterrupted. And we have a kind of subordinate queue that can be created off of that called a streaming queue. And what that does is it takes a near exact copy of the message as it flows across, and every single message as it flows across, and puts it onto the streaming queue so that you can then send that to something else. I mentioned earlier about being a source for Kafka. It could be sent into a data lake, or it could be sent directly into analytics or AI applications. So three things there. Being able to connect applications across the entire organization, being able to capture message data as it flows across your network, and also ensuring that we have complete data sets. So if you were looking at analytics or AI, MQ can really, really help ensure that you've got data quantity and data quality. And then finally, business-wide hybrid cloud connectivity. So businesses are really redefining how they compete, building strong partnerships that enable them to expand into new markets and grow revenue. But participating in an ecosystem requires the ability to manage these relationships. Businesses generally, depending on their size, have different requirements. So small to medium businesses generally need a more cost-effective solution that enables them to connect with multiple partners, something that has a light footprint, something that has minimal infrastructure so that they can reduce costs. Larger organizations typically need connectivity that automates management, as well as the ability to exchange high volumes of messages, as well as file data. So it's really, really important when we think about, how businesses start to partner, that they think about kind of security, that they think about the like where this data is coming from, where it's going to. And so how does MQ help with this? So first of all, low cost standardization. And we'll talk, I'll give an example of this actually towards the end. But we've got a couple of options here. So first of all, MQ has a really small install footprint. So not only is it perfect for containerized deployments, but also if we think about small to medium businesses, MQ is really cost effective when it comes to smaller deployments. And we have our SaaS service as well. So for organizations that are typically that are smaller, who typically want to be able to focus more on the logic because teams are perhaps working across multiple different IT disciplines. The SaaS option is a really, really great way to get going with MQ. But also, if you are looking at running in containers or you are looking at VMs, you can get going with MQ with a relatively small footprint. MQ actually, we ourselves run MQ in containers at half a core. So that hopefully gives you an idea of just how light a footprint MQ has. But also we have things called the redistributable clients as well. So if you wanted to connect into partners, not only will you have an install of MQ, but you can enable your partners to get MQ clients as well for free, so that they can transfer messages into your MQ network. MQ is really secure. So there are a number of different security mechanisms within MQ. I think I mentioned this towards the beginning. But you can secure communications with TLS, identity and access management. But we also have something called AMS, which is advanced message security. And this is end-to-end. This is end-to-end security for messages. So as soon as they're sent from one application, they are encrypted until they're received by the intended destination. So AMS is really, really powerful. It can help with data integrity. It can help with data authorization, making sure that the message isn't peeked at while it's in transit. So it's really, really useful if security is of high priority to companies. But also, we have things like auditing capabilities as well. So, if you do need auditing capabilities, you can either use the built-in function that we've got, or something like the streaming queues. So streaming queues, a lot of customers have come to us and said, we're going to use it for auditing because, we can keep a record of every single message, not just that the message was transferred, but also the actual data that was transferred as part of it. And then finally, always on messaging. So when you're working with partners, it's really key to ensure that not only are your systems always available, but that your data is available as well. So ensuring that peaks in workloads, if you're getting a lot of traffic coming in from partner organizations, that you've got a messaging solution that can handle that, essentially. So one of the capabilities that we've got, I mentioned uniform clusters. When it comes to building resilient architectures, then we've got something called native HA. So I mentioned this before, and I've got a graphic just here, bottom right hand of the screen, that shows how we've got multiple application instances connecting into an active queue manager, and the data is being replicated across two others. And so this is really smart because it works in a quorum way. So these replica queues and the active queues are all kind of voting on who's actually going to be processing the message. So not only are messages available in the event the active queue manager fails, so that one of the replicas can take over, but they'll vote. As long as they can each see each other, they'll decide who's processing. And this is sub-second time as well. So we have a system that is very, very highly resilient. The message data itself is always available. And so that when you're getting messages in from a partner, if one of your systems goes down while you're processing that the data will be picked up and secure on another queue manager. So I mentioned a couple of things about containers. I've sort of briefly talked about Red Hat and things like that, but I wanted to just make it very clear that, we have customers who run in containers today. We've got tons of customers who are running in VMs. They have no intention of moving to containers, and we'll continue to support them and deliver capabilities that enable them to build, again, the same highly resilient, always on queue managers that they're building before. But we've supported containers since about 2015 and 2018 maybe. But for many years we've supported customers running in containers. Like I said, we run half-core queue managers in production for our cloud service today. And we've put an awful lot of innovation into the product to enable companies to deploy loosely coupled large networks of applications that are connected to MQ servers. So really, really good for companies who've got microservices, who have the requirements around scalability and being always on. But also, if you wanted to run on Red Hat OpenShift, for instance, we've got things like our certified container image. Or if you wanted to deploy in Kubernetes, for instance, we support customers who are running outside of OpenShift in Kubernetes as well. So all of the things I've talked about, when we talk about MQ being the choice for cloud native messaging, a lot of customers kind of think, well, this is MQ, this is IBM. And they tend to think about, mainframes and, not cloud native doesn't necessarily pop into the forefront of your mind when you think about something like MQ, particularly if you've sort of worked closely but not with MQ. So MQ is container native. So things like the ability to be loosely coupled, having that anonymity between applications, being horizontally scalable, being able to replicate data across multiple instances, declarative deployments, and open APIs and protocols. So all of these sorts of things, if you think about the definition of cloud native, you can look at all of these, and MQ adheres to these practices and supports customers on their cloud native journey. If you want more information about this, if you want to kind of understand in more detail about what MQ does and how it can help here, there's a couple of webcasts that were recorded. I think it was earlier this year, might have been last year. Those are really good to go and have a look at, to kind of watch again. And our chief architect, David Ware, talks in a lot of detail about how MQ has been developed over the years and how customers are deploying it in a very cloud native way. So just a quick one on that, kind of proof point. We have customers today, and actually this is one of our retail customers. They are deploying MQ on Kubernetes today, and they've gone from weeks to deploy an application to minutes. It's with MQ, it's really impressive to actually see that they have no downtime. So it's not like they even have to plan for downtime anymore. They've got an always on solution. And like I said, if you want to understand a bit more about how this company has achieved it, then I would definitely recommend searching on the webcast around cloud native always on MQ. So we talked about the fact that MQ is critical for applications to connect both within an organization, across a hybrid multi-cloud architecture, with partners, for AI, and to support ensuring that we have the correct data wherever we are across the organization. But we didn't really talk about the fact that MQ is evolving and innovating and things like that. And I wanted to share one user story, one success story with you just before we finish, and that's modusbox. So modusbox are a US fintech, and they were under pressure to modernize core banking infrastructure in a manner that's consistent with their existing investments in transformative IT operational models, such as cloud and Kubernetes. Now, hopefully everyone's heard of the Federal Reserve. So the Federal Reserve mandate that MQ is used for their Fedline Direct services. So if you search for those, you'll see that customers who want to connect with them, partners who want to connect, they need to connect over MQ. And one of the reasons for that is that MQ is really secure. You've got that assured message delivery, all of those things that we talked about at the very beginning of the presentation. And so modusbox approached this with a bit of trepidation. They wanted to connect to the Federal Reserve. They realized they needed to use MQ, and they were a bit concerned at this kind of by this essentially this meeting of different styles. They had this view in their mind that MQ meant more traditional deployment models, whereas they were very cloud native, using cloud Kubernetes and things like that. And actually, they had a very successful and very positive experience when they were deploying MQ. So you can see here, CTO Kent Brown said that it's a record, to go live within a year of starting discussions with the Federal Reserve, and they were in production. So not only is this a really great story for IBM MQ, but also they're deploying in OpenShift on AWS. And they're using things like native HA to create that resilient, highly available architecture. So this is a really good example, and we do have more information on this on our IBM.com web pages as well. So if you wanted to read the full case study, that's available there. So essentially, they ended up with their end-to-end solution being fully compliant with the Federal Reserve Bank, and the containerized solution that they deployed, allowing for rolling upgrades and access to OpenShift capabilities, ensuring that they stay right at the leading edge of connectivity. So really, really a good example of someone who, never used MQ before, but they got going, they deployed a really modern solution very, very quickly. So I mentioned I've got just over 10 minutes left. So I did mention that I would talk about what's new for any existing MQ users who are on the call, but also for those who are new to IBM MQ. I wanted to just cover how we deliver the product itself. So we have major releases that happen every 2 years, roughly. So our latest release is version 9.3. So that has been announced. That's actually going live, so GA, general availability, on Thursday. So this Thursday the 23rd, that will be available. But we also have some things called CD releases. So these are continuous delivery. And these are released roughly every 4 months. And these introduce new function as part of each release. So for those customers who can continually integrate, who can do those rolling upgrades, continuous delivery is quite attractive because it means they can get hold of the latest capabilities and take advantage of them as they're released. However, we've got a lot of customers who prefer long-term support. So these are fixed function. So we don't deliver anything into the LTS releases during the CD cycle, as you can see, except for security patches, maintenance updates, those sorts of things. So no new function goes into it. So it's very, very stable in terms of the function, in terms of fixed function. But what we've done in version 9.3 is we've rolled all of the capabilities that were delivered as part of our version 9.2 CD releases. So that's V9.2.1, 9.2.2, 9.2.3, 2.4, and so on. We've rolled all of those capabilities into our version 9.3 LTS. So you can be sure that if you're taking the version 9.3, that we've iterated on capabilities that were delivered, we've improved them based on customer feedback. For instance, our native HA capability, that was released in version 9.2.3, and we've had a couple of incremental deliveries into that based on customer feedback, so that the version that's being delivered as part of 9.3 LTS is really kind of a full function offering that customers can deploy and get value from. And it's possible for customers to mix and match. So we do have some customers who use LTS in certain parts of their organization and CD in others, depending on the needs of the business. So just to, as a kind of final slide, to show some of the enhancements that have been made in version 9.3, so enhancements that were delivered throughout the CD cycle and also as part of 9.3. There's a huge amount of stuff that goes into every major release for MQ, and also a lot that goes into each CD release. And this is only a partial. So actually, there were too many boxes to fit, basically. The writing would have been too small. But I wanted to highlight some things on here. So, for instance, I've talked about streaming queues. I've talked about native HA, but we've got things like, let's see, start-stop of MFT resource monitors, redistributable MFT logger. So you'll see a few things on there. So MFT is our managed file transfer capability. So this is the ability to transfer files across an MQ network. So lots of customers we have using that. And so you'll see that, we try and make updates based on customer feedback as much as possible. Also things like TLS support, so TLS 1.3 updates not just across things like our internet pass-through, but also across all protocols. So we've got things like the TLS only communication switch that are implemented. So lots of things around security. So we have password updates and all sorts. But if you wanted to know what's new, then within the next few months, we will be doing another webcast that talks specifically about some of these new capabilities that we delivered into version 9.3. And of course, if you did want to discuss anything, if you're an existing customer or a potential customer, one of the things that we try and do as much as possible is talk to our customers. We want to hear from you. We want to understand your business objectives. We want to understand how you want to use MQ and how you're currently using MQ. So if there was anything that you wanted a specific discussion on, we're always open to having those, to kind of show you what we've done, how it can be used to the best advantage, and also talking about roadmaps and things like that. If customers wanted to understand what we've done and where we're going, we're happy to have those calls as well. So with that, I will say thank you. We do have a bit of time for questions. Just a quick word before we get into the questions then. So I have put a QR code on here to go to the website. So if you're new, that gives you a really, really good overview about some of the key capabilities within MQ, because I have not discussed very many of them today. There's a whole lot that MQ does that I've not touched on. But also we've got a podcast as well. So we've got 3 seasons. Each episode is roughly 20-25 minutes long, something like that. And each episode has an MQ expert, either from within MQ or from one of our customer or partner organizations, talking about how they use it. So it's a really good way to understand a bit more about MQ, whether you're in the car, cooking, whatever. Okay, so let's have a look and see if we've got any questions then. So first of all, is there going to be a recording? Yes, there will be a recording, so you can listen again. Can you please explain the difference between event messaging and enterprise messaging? So at a high level, event messaging is in response to something. So for instance, if a new order is placed, I might want to take an action based off of that. So if I'm receiving a message that says this order has been placed, there might be a few things that I want to do or a few different systems that I need to notify. And so those applications can subscribe to my topics, essentially. And so when that notification for my order being placed is made, then they will see that they'll get that message and be able to go off and process and do whatever they need to do, whether that's informing shipping or updating stock inventory or doing something around payments. Hopefully that's a good example of event messaging. Enterprise messaging actually encompasses event messaging. So when we think about enterprise messaging, if we start kind of at one end and we think about events, that could be something like Kafka, where we're doing like huge scale in terms of the consumers of those events. Or it could be something a bit more granular, as I mentioned, around MQ, so fine-grained events. And then on the other side of the spectrum, we've got mission-critical messaging. And this can mean things from, I need every single message to get from its sender to the receiver. Or I might have conversational messaging. So this is where I'm an application and I'm saying, this has happened, or that here's a piece of data and the receiving application needs to do something with it and tell me that that's been done. So there's a real broad spectrum when it comes to enterprise messaging that includes event messaging. They're not different, they're quite similar. And in this presentation, like I said, there is a link that takes you to Kafka and MQ. So if you wanted to read more about that and kind of understand a bit more about the use cases that each one's really good for, I would definitely recommend that. Okay, so let's see. So lots about, will the slides be shared? Do I have access to this material? Yes, is the answer. So these slides will be available for download soon. Is Streaming Queue a new feature in version 9.3? Yes. So for customers who were running MQ continuous delivery, this capability was made available mid last year as part of version 9.2.3. So customers on CD could get hold of it then. If you're on LTS versions, then you will be able to access that as of Thursday, the 23rd of June, when our version 9.3 goes GA. Okay. Can we do event messaging in IBM MQ? Yes, is the answer. So like I said, MQ does have publish and subscribe capabilities so that you can create producers of information that provide messages to a number of subscribers, and you can subscribe multiple applications to topics so that they can get hold of messages when an event occurs. Again, if you want more information about that, there was a link that talks about it, and I think as part of that article, that will take you either to the documentation, and I know that we've also done a couple of other webcasts. So if you search for MQ events, then you should be able to find some webcasts that talk about that. Again, I know our architect, David Ware, has done a few of those as well. And also, if you're familiar with it, TechCon. So this is a conference that IBM run for developers. So TechCon 2022, there was a really good session around events and messaging. So if you're familiar with that, I would definitely recommend it as well. Let's see. So I've worked with Tuxedo /Q, now supporting WebSphere on mainframe and Linux, and I do quite a lot of MQ configuration. Can you suggest an appropriate reference book for MQ that covers basic concepts with hands-on examples? Well, I can go better, and I can suggest our Learn MQ material. So we've got a messaging fundamentals course that you can do. And that gives a really good introduction, not just for deploying MQ in VMs on Linux. I'm not sure about mainframe. It covers more distributed. But yeah, Learn MQ is really good as a kind of introduction to the basics of MQ. And then off the back of that, there are lots of materials that are provided, so links to materials to go in depth on different topics. But of course, if there is something that you're looking for and you can't find it, I haven't actually put the email address on here, but it's ask messaging, so all one word, ASK messaging, so ask messaging at uk.ibm.com. And you can send us a message, if there's something you can't find, or if you need information on something, you can ask us, and we will, do our best to provide the answer. Can you expand upon MQ SaaS offering on AWS? I think this is the last question we'll have time for because we're almost at the top of the hour. But yeah, so you can use IBM MQ as a service on AWS. So we use the IBM Cloud as our control plane. So you log into IBM Cloud, you go to the IBM Cloud catalog, select MQ, you can log in, build your queue manager, connect your applications, and at deploy time, you can either choose to deploy to IBM Cloud or to AWS. And we support a couple of different AWS data centers in the US and in Europe. All of your data, if you're deploying on AWS, stays on the AWS cloud. It doesn't come back into the IBM cloud. There's no requirement for that. And if you need more information on that service, then I would suggest, just if you Google IBM MQ Cloud Catalog, that will take you to our catalog page, and there's an information, about Doc that's part of that catalog page, and that tells you all about the service and how to deploy it. So with that, thank you very much all for your time today. Like I said, if you do have any questions, please feel free to reach out to me or to ask messaging. Send us a message through our website. But again, thanks very much for your time.